The air in the $800 million boardroom was so cold it could freeze secrets. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, a cheating millionaire with his mistress Amber perched on his lap. He was there to claim his father's empire. At the end of the table, silent and invisible, sat Clara, his humiliated assistant, forced to take notes on her own dispossession. Richard thought this was his coronation. He had no idea it was his execution, because the lawyer about to read the will knew the one secret that would burn Richard's entire world to the ground, his hidden marriage. The 50th floor boardroom of Sterling Global was less an office and more a monument to power. Its walls were seamless panels of glass, offering a godlike view of the city below. The table itself was a single 40-foot slab of polished obsidian, reflecting the cold grey sky. It was a tomb dressed as a throne room, and everyone was there to read the last will and testament of the man who built it, Arthur Sterling. At the head of the table, Richard Sterling, Arthur's only son, lounged in the high-backed leather chair. He hadn't earned the seat, but he occupied it by default. He was handsome in a cruel, predatory way, with a bespoke suit that cost more than a car, and a smirk that had never met a consequence. Perched ostentatiously on his knee, her laughter echoing too loudly in the sterile room, was Amber Duval. She was a woman sculpted by ambition, and silicone poured into a red dress that screamed for attention. A massive glittering diamond one Richard had bought with his father's money last week adorned her left hand. She was his fiancée, a title she wielded like a weapon. And then at the very far end of the table, almost comically distant, sat Clara. Clara was Richard's assistant. At least that's what he called her in public. She wore a simple beige blazer that was neatly pressed but hopelessly out of place. Her brown hair was pulled back in a functional severe bun. Her job today, Richard had generously told her, was to sit quietly, take meticulous notes, and call his tailor to confirm his fitting for the celebration of life party he was planning. She was the ghost at the feast. Clara, darling, be a doll. Amber trilled, not bothering to look at her. Richard needs more coffee. Black, and don't spill it this time. Your hands look awfully shaky. Richard chuckled a low, arrogant sound. He squeezed Amber's waist. Easy, Angel. We have to pretend to be nice to the staff, at least until the old man's lawyer gets here. Clara's face remained perfectly, unnervingly blank. She didn't flinch, didn't sigh, didn't even blink. She simply rose her posture straight and walked to the gleaming chrome coffee station. Her reflection in the glass wall was pale and translucent, a stark contrast to the vibrant, cruel life at the other end of the room. Richard watched her go, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. Contempt. He had Clara exactly where he wanted her under his thumb, silenced by years of quiet pressure and broken promises. She was his little secret, his background appliance. He thought she was weak, timid, and most importantly, terrified of him. He was wrong. God, Richard, can we get this over with? Amber whined, running a perfectly manicured nail down his lapel. This room gives me a headache. As soon as we own this place, I'm painting everything gold. Whatever you want, my love, Richard murmured, kissing her neck. Just a few more minutes of legal nonsense and it's all ours. The company, the estates, the jets, everything. Dad might have been a stubborn old dinosaur, but he knew who his only heir was. And that prude sister of yours, Delia, Amber scoffed, the one who ran off to find herself in Africa. She'll get a painting or something. Richard waved a dismissive hand. Dad disowned her practically. No, this is all for me. For us? Clara returned, placing the fine china cup on a coaster beside Richard. Her hand was perfectly steady. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at Amber. She simply returned to her seat at the far end of the table, opened a leather-bound notebook and clicked her pen. She was ready. The heavy mahogany doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. A man who seemed to be carved from the same stern material entered. This was Alistair Finch, senior partner at the prestigious law firm Covington & Associates, and Arthur Sterling's executor for 30 years. He was an old-world man dressed in a three-piece suit that had never seen a single wrinkle. His face was a mask of professional neutrality. "Mr. Sterling, Ms. Duval," he said, his voice a dry rustle. He nodded once curtly in Amber's direction. Then his gaze traveled the entire 40-foot length of the table. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, met Clara's. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice clear and respectful. "I'm glad you could make it." Amber burst out laughing. "Did you hear that, Richie? He called the help Mrs. Sterling." Richard's face tightened. "Alistair, you're mistaken. This is Clara, my assistant. She's just here to take notes." Mr. Finch stared at Richard, his expression unreadable. "My apologies. Let us begin." He sat, placing a thick leather-bound portfolio on the obsidian table. The click of the brass clasps echoed in the silence. Clara kept her eyes down on her notebook. Inside her heart was not pounding with fear. It was pounding with the slow, heavy, rhythmic beat of a war drum. Alistair Finch opened the portfolio. The air in the room seemed to thin, the pressure dropping. Richard leaned forward, his casual arrogance tightening into raw, undisguised greed. Amber was texting already, shopping for a new yacht on her phone. "I am here. Mr. Finch," began, his voice cutting through the silence, "to read the last will and testament of Arthur James Sterling, executed on the 4th of October of this year, just 6 weeks ago." Richard's smirk faltered. 6 weeks. He changed it. "Your father was of perfectly sound mind and body until his final moments," Mr. Finch stated flatly, preempting the obvious challenge. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. The will started with the predictable minor bequests. "To my sister Eleanor Sterling Price, I leave a sum of $200,000 with the hope she finally stops backing my son's failed business ventures." Richard scowled. "Insolent old man. To my longtime groundskeeper, Mr. Samuel Barnes, I leave his cottage title-free and a pension of $50,000 per year for life for his decades of loyalty." $50,000 a year? To a gardener, Amber whispered, outraged. "To my daughter, Delia Sterling." Finch continued, his voice steady. "The one who ran off to Africa." He paused, lifting his eyes to look directly at Richard, who flushed. "I leave the sum of $20 million and full funding for her non-profit medical clinic in Nairobi, a project I was and am exceptionally proud of." Richard shot to his feet. $20 million to that ungrateful brat. She hasn't spoken to him in years. "She spoke to him every Sunday, Richard," Mr. Finch said coolly. "You were simply never home to notice." Richard sank back into his chair, his face a thundercloud. "Fine. Whatever. $20 million is a rounding error. Get to the main event, Alistair. The company. The estate." Mr. Finch turned a page. The paper made a crisp, authoritative sound. "And now we come to my son, Richard Arthur Sterling." Richard sat up, straightening his tie. He cast a triumphant, smug look at Amber, who put her phone down. This was it. The $800 million jackpot. Clara's pen hovered over the paper. She didn't breathe. "To my son, Richard." Mr. Finch read his voice, devoid of emotion, "who has demonstrated time and again that he possesses neither my business sense nor my moral compass. I leave 2 items." The blood drained from Richard's face. Two items." Mr. Finch nodded. "First, I leave him my original 1965 Omega Speedmaster watch. the one I was wearing when I signed my first $1 million contract. I hope that in wearing it, he might one day learn the value of time, which he has so flagrantly wasted. Richard's jaw was slack. A watch. And second. Mr. Finch continued, I leave him the sum of $10,000 to be paid from the company's petty cash fund. Silence. Not a sound, not a breath. The hum of the building's climate control was suddenly a roar. Amber was the first to move. She slowly turned her head to look at Richard, her eyes wide with disbelief. 10,000, she whispered. Richard stared at Mr. Finch. He was looking for the punchline. He started to laugh, a high-pitched, unnatural sound that died in his throat. Very funny, Alistair. A good joke. Dad always loved to put me on the spot. Now where's the real addendum, the part where I get the company? There is no addendum, Richard, Mr. Finch said. That is the entirety of your inheritance. $10,000 and a watch. No. Richard's voice was low, trembling with a tectonic rage. No, you're lying. He was senile. He was confused. I'll fight this. I will burn this company to the ground before I let you. The will is ironclad. Mr. Finch interrupted, his voice like granite. Your father had 3 separate psychological evaluations in the week leading up to the signing. All 3 are attached here, notarized and filed. He was in the legal and medical sense more than competent. Then who? Richard roared, slamming his fists on the obsidian table so hard the china cup rattled. Who gets it? The gardener's dog? A charity? Amber was white as a sheet. Richard, what is this? You promised me. Shut up, Amber, Richard snapped, turning his furious gaze back to the lawyer. Read the rest, Alistair. Read it now. Mr. Finch took a slow, deliberate breath. He looked down at the final page of the will. Very well, he said. The final bequest. All remaining assets, properties and holdings, including my controlling 85% stake in Sterling Global, my primary residences in New York, London and Geneva, and my entire liquid portfolio valued at approximately $820 million I leave. He paused. He lifted his gaze from the paper. He looked past the raging, apoplectic Richard. He looked past the terrified gold-digging mistress. He looked 40 feet down the table directly into the calm, waiting eyes of the assistant. I leave in their entirety to the only person in my son's life who demonstrated loyalty, intelligence, and grace under extreme pressure. The only person I have come to trust. My beloved daughter-in-law, Mrs. Clara Sterling. The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was a vacuum, sucking the air and the color from the room. Richard Sterling stood, frozen his face, a grotesque mask of confusion and rage. His brain simply could not process the words. Amber was the first to find her voice. It was a shrill, confused shriek. Mrs. Who? Clara, is this a joke, Richard? What is he talking about, daughter-in-law? Richard's head swiveled slowly like a gun turret toward the end of the table. He stared at Clara, who was still sitting perfectly upright, her pen still poised over her notebook. Daughter-in-law, he repeated, his voice, a hoarse whisper. Alistair, you've gone mad. That's Clara, my assistant, my employee. She is not your employee, Richard. Mr. Finch said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. And her name is Mrs. Clara Sterling, your wife. My wife. Amber scrambled off Richard's lap, her red dress hiking up her thighs. She looked back and forth between Richard and Clara, her mind optimized for calculating financial gain, now short-circuiting. Richard, she screamed. What is he talking about? You told me you were a widower. You told me your wife died in a car crash 10 years ago. Richard's face had gone from red to a sickly mottled white. He was sweating his expensive suit, suddenly looking like a prison uniform. "He's lying," Richard yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the lawyer. "It's a conspiracy. She's nobody. I'm not married. We're... "You were. What, Richard?" Mr. Finch's voice was ice. "Are you about to commit perjury in an inheritance meeting because I have the documentation? I had it couriered from my office vault this morning, just in case you decided to perform." Finch reached into his portfolio and pulled out a single laminated document. He slid it across the obsidian table. It spun, gliding perfectly past Richard, and came to a stop directly in front of Amber. It was a certificate of marriage, County of Washoe, Reno, Nevada, June 4th, 2018, groom Richard Arthur Sterling, bride Clara Annabelle Hayes. Amber stared at it. She looked at the date. 7 years ago. 7 years. She had been dating Richard for 2. Reno. She breathed her eyes wide with horror. You married her." Richard was cornered. The smirk was gone, replaced by the snarling panic of a trapped animal. "It was nothing. A mistake. We were in Vegas for a weekend. It was a drunken. It wasn't real. It was supposed to be annulled." "It was not annulled," Mr. Finch stated. "It was filed. It is legal. And as you never filed for divorce, you are, by the laws of the state of Nevada and the state of New York, very much married. Which makes Clara..." Mr. Finch continued, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice, "your legal wife, and as per your father's will, the new owner of Sterling Global." Amber let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She wasn't just not going to be the wife of a billionaire. She had been the mistress of a broke married man. The humiliation was total. "You liar!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. She ripped the massive diamond from her finger, the one she now realized was bought with Clara's money, and hurled it at Richard's head. He ducked, and the ring bounced off the glass wall with a pathetic tink. "You're married to that..." Amber gestured at Clara, who was now finally closing her notebook. "That mousy, pathetic frump. You told me she was your cousin's old roommate, that you gave her a pity job. You've been lying to me for 2 years. Amber, baby, listen." Richard pleaded, his power evaporating. "We can fix this. She'll sign it over. She's stupid. She doesn't know anything. We'll give her a little money. She'll go away. Fix this." Amber's face was a mask of pure venom. "You humiliated me. You made me the other woman. I'll sue you for every penny you don't have. I'll... She was hyperventilating her grand performance as Lady of the Manor, collapsing into a cheap, desperate tantrum. She grabbed her $10,000 handbag, spun on her heel, and stormed toward the doors. "You will hear from my lawyer, Richard," she screamed, yanking the door open. "You're a dead man. You're a married, broke dead man." The mahogany door slammed shut, the boom echoing in the vast, silent room. Richard stood, breathing heavily. He was alone. The mistress was gone. The money was gone. There was only him, the lawyer, and Clara. He slowly turned his head, his eyes landing on his wife, the assistant, the new CEO. "You," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous low growl. "You did this." Richard started to walk his steps, slow and predatory, down the 40-foot length of the table. He was stalking toward Clara, his composure utterly shattered, replaced by a pure, undiluted narcissism. "You conniving little snake," he spat, his voice echoing. "You think you can steal my company? My life?" He was halfway down the table. Mr. Finch watched his hand, hovering near the intercom button on the table's console. "My father was a senile old fool, and you tricked him. You poisoned him against me." Clara didn't move. She didn't cower. She simply watched him approach, her expression as calm as a frozen lake. "You are going to sign it all back," Richard growled, now only a few feet from her. He leaned over the table, his face close to hers. "You're going to sign a post-nuptial agreement, waive all rights, and then you're going to sign those divorce papers I had drawn up last month. You'll get nothing. You are nothing." He smiled, a terrifying, humorless baring of teeth. "You're just the help, Clara. You've always been the help. Now give me a pen." For the first time that day, Clara's expression changed. The blank, submissive mask dissolved, and she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was sharp, precise, and cold as the obsidian table between them. "No," she said. Her voice wasn't the timid whisper Richard was used to. It was clear, strong, and resonant. "I don't think I will." Richard recoiled as if she'd slapped him. What did you say to me?" Clara finally stood up. She wasn't the cowering mouse he thought he knew. She was tall, her posture immaculate. The beige blazer suddenly looked less like a uniform and more like armor. "I said no, Richard." She walked around the chair and stood facing him. "You seem to be under several misconceptions. Let me clear them up for you. First, your father was not senile. He was the sharpest man I've ever known. Second, I didn't poison him against you. You did that every time you lied, every time you cheated, and every time you stole from his company." Richard's face was a study in baffled fury. "Stole I never— Oh, please." Clara cut him off, her voice dripping with a disdain he had never heard. "The Project Titan slush fund. The Cayman accounts you thought were secret. The $1.2 million you diverted to consulting fees that just so happened to pay for Ms. Duval's apartment, and that ridiculous ring your father knew. He's known for 18 months. Richard was speechless. He was completely out of his depth. He was testing me," he stammered. "It was a loyalty test." "It was a criminal investigation, Richard," Clara said flatly, "and you failed spectacularly." How do you know all this?" he whispered. "You're just the note-taker." "That," Clara said, "was the biggest mistake you ever made. You thought because I was quiet, I was stupid. You thought because I was kind, I was weak. You never not once bothered to look at the woman you married." She turned her gaze to Mr. Finch. "Alistair, if you would." Mr. Finch nodded, a faint smile of deep respect on his face. He opened another file. "This is a flashback, so to speak, a deposition from Arthur Sterling dated 6 months ago." He pressed a button on the console, and Arthur Sterling's voice, powerful, clear, and very much alive, filled the room. Voiceover of Arthur. "I found Clara crying in the library 2 years ago. Richard had just forgotten their anniversary, and instead I'd seen him on page 6 with that vulgar blonde woman Amber. I asked Clara to sit with me. I asked her why she stayed. She said she'd made a vow. I told her vows of loyalty aren't meant to be suicide pacts." Clara's eyes were fixed on Richard, who looked like he was seeing a ghost. Arthur's voice continues. "I started talking to her, really talking, not as my son's assistant, but as a person. I asked her what she thought of the company. She hesitated. I pressed. And then, my God, she didn't just have opinions, she had solutions. She had a master's in economics from Wharton Richard. Did you even know that she graduated summa cum laude? You met her when she was catering one of your parties, and you thought she was just a pretty face to control. She told me she dropped out," Richard stammered. "I lied," Clara said simply. "It was easier than trying to compete with your fragile, massive ego." Arthur's voice. "I knew my son was a liability, a charming, empty shell, I was terrified he would destroy my life's work. So I made a new plan. I started giving Clara projects. Secretly. Project Aegis, I called it. I told Richard it was a new AI analytics division I was outsourcing. It wasn't. It was Clara working from a private office I rented for her. She analyzed our supply chains. She restructured our debt, the Kenzie Solutions deal. The one that saved our entire Q3. That wasn't me, Richard. That was Clara. She negotiated it, she closed it, and she let you take the credit for it at the board meeting. Richard's legs gave out. He stumbled back and fell into a chair. He was ruined. He wasn't just disinherited. He had been outplayed. Arthur's voice, final, she proved her worth. She proved her loyalty. She proved her brilliance. The company isn't her reward, Alistair. It's her right. She's the only one I trust to run it. She is my true successor. She is the Sterling I always wished I had. The recording clicked off. Clara looked at her husband. Your father and I spoke every day for the last 2 years, Richard. He was more of a partner to me than you ever were. He knew you were planning to divorce me after the will was read. He knew you were planning to marry Amber. He knew everything. And he made absolutely sure that you would have nothing left to offer anyone. Richard just sat there, his head in his hands. He was a hollowed-out man, the arrogance and charm stripped away, leaving only a pathetic, whining core. My life, it's over, he whimpered, staring at the obsidian table. You've taken everything. Clara walked over to the head of the table. She didn't sit in the chair. She stood behind it, placing her hands on the back of it. It was her chair now. You have that wrong, Richard, she said, her voice echoing with the full authority of the room. I didn't take anything. You gave it all away. You gave it away when you lied, when you cheated, and when you assumed I was a piece of furniture. She looked at Mr. Finch. Alistair. Thank you. My pleasure, Mrs. Sterling, he said, closing the final portfolio. Or should I say, Madam CEO. Richard looked up, his eyes wild with a final, desperate spark of defiance. You can't do this. You don't know how to run this company. Not really. The market will panic. The board will revolt. They'll never accept you. Clara smiled, that same cold, brilliant smile. The board, you mean, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Vane, and Mrs. Davies, Mr. Henderson, who I've been playing chess with at your father's club for a year. Mr. Vane, whose daughter I helped get into the Wharton graduate program. Or Mrs. Davies, who personally oversaw Project Aegis with me and your father. She shook her head. You're behind the times, Richard. The board already knows. They've known for 6 months who the real heir was. They're waiting for me in the conference center right now for my first official address as CEO. The finality of it hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just beaten, he was irrelevant. As for you, Clara continued, her voice losing all its warmth. You are, of course, fired. Effective immediately. Your corporate accounts are frozen. Your access to this building is revoked, and your company car is being towed from the garage as we speak. Fired, he croaked. For cause... Mr. Finch supplied, standing up and straightening his suit. Attempted embezzlement of company funds, to be precise. Arthur was generous in not having the DA file charges. I believe, however, that Mrs. Sterling may not be so sentimental. Clara looked at him. That depends, Richard. On you. She walked to the intercom on the table, the one Mr. Finch had been guarding. She pressed the button. Frank, she said, her voice crisp. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, a voice replied instantly. Please send security to the 50th floor boardroom. Mr. Richard Sterling is trespassing and needs to be escorted from the premises. Right away, Madam CEO, Richard shot to his feet. You're throwing me out to me. This is my name on the building. It's my name now, Richard, Clara said. A name you were ashamed of until the moment it became valuable. The mahogany doors swung open, and 2 large uniformed security guards entered the room. They were professional, but their eyes were firm. Mr. Sterling, sir, you'll have to come with us. Richard looked at the guards, at Mr. Finch, and finally at his wife. The woman he had ignored, humiliated, and controlled for 7 years. There was no recognition in her eyes. She was a stranger. A queen. Clara, please. He begged, the last shred of his dignity gone. Don't do this. I'm your husband. We can work this out. I'll leave Amber. I'll do anything. I love you, Clara. I've always... Clara held up her hand. The simple gesture stopped his words cold. Your divorce papers, Richard. I'll have my lawyers send them to you. Not the ones you drew up, but mine. You will sign them. You will get exactly what your father left you that watch, and $10,000. If you fight me, if you contest this, if you so much as breathe my name to the press, I will hand over the Project Titan file to the district attorney. Your father's mercy ended when he did. Mine is conditional. The guards took his arms. No, you can't. He started to struggle, his voice rising to a pathetic shriek. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? I am Richard Sterling. No, you're not, Clara said quietly as they dragged him past the obsidian table. You're just a footnote. The door slammed shut and the room was for the first time peaceful. Clara stood in the silence for a long moment. Mr. Finch gathered his papers. A formidable performance, Mrs. Sterling, he said. Clara turned to the glass wall, looking down at the city. Her city, her company. It wasn't a performance, Alistair, she said. It was a debut. She took the elastic band from her hair, and her long brown hair fell over her shoulders. She undid the top button of her blazer. The transformation was complete. Shall we go? She said, turning to him. The board is waiting. To understand the totality of Richard's defeat, one had to look back further than the boardroom. Arthur Sterling hadn't just decided to disinherit his son. He had, with Clara's help, built a cage of his son's own making. The story truly began 3 years ago, not with Clara, but with a man named Marcus Thorne, the CFO of Sterling Global's European division based in Geneva. Thorne was an old friend of Arthur's, a man of numbers and integrity. He was the first to notice the leaks. Small amounts at first. A few thousand here, a few thousand there, all routed through a shell entity named Titan Consulting. It was sloppy, but hidden just deep enough that a casual audit wouldn't catch it. Marcus, however, was not a casual auditor. He flew to New York and met Arthur, not at the office, but at his private club. He laid out the files. Arthur, we have a problem, and I think it's Richard. Arthur was devastated. He wanted to deny it, but the evidence was clear. Richard was stealing from him. It was then that Arthur, heartbroken, began to truly see his son for the viper he was. This was right around the time Arthur had his first real conversation with Clara. After discovering her intellect, Arthur gave Clara her first test. He gave her the Titan Consulting file, omitting that he suspected Richard. He told her it was a third-party consultant he was vetting for a new project. Tell me what you think, Clara. Give it a look. See if their numbers are sound. She took the file. 2 days later, she returned to his study. She was pale. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice quiet. This isn't a real company. It's a shell. The routing numbers, they're set up to mirror our own internal expense codes, but they terminate in an unsecured, unlisted account in the Cayman Islands. This isn't a consultant. This is an embezzler." Arthur just looked at her. "Who is it, Clara?" Clara hesitated. She knew. She had seen Richard on the phone scribbling notes on a pad with Titan written at the top. She had seen the bank slips he'd carelessly left on his home desk. "Clara," Arthur said gently, "I know you are a loyal person, but your loyalty is misplaced. Who is it?" "It's Richard," she whispered. I think he's been doing it for at least a year. The account in the Caymans. It's under a holding company, RAS Holdings, Richard Arthur Sterling." Arthur Sterling had to leave the room. He was gone for 10 minutes. When he returned, his eyes were clear and cold. The loving father was gone. The CEO had taken his place. "He's a fool," Arthur said. "Not just a thief, but a stupid one. He used his own initials." "What are you going to do?" Clara asked. "What are we going to do?" Arthur corrected. "I'm going to let him continue, and you are going to help me build a case." For the next 2 years, Project Aegis had a dual purpose. On the surface, it was Clara's proving ground, her secret ladder to the top. She restructured deals, saved the company millions, and learned the inner workings of every division. But its secret second purpose was to build an airtight legal case against Richard. Clara and Marcus Thorne became a silent, efficient team. They tracked every wire transfer. They documented every fake invoice Richard approved. They watched as he grew bolder, diverting $1.2 million to buy Amber's loyalty, believing the slush fund was his own clever invention, a secret playground the old man was too stupid to see. He had no idea he was just a rat in a maze, and his father and his wife were the scientists watching from above. When Arthur knew he was dying, he called Clara and Alistair Finch to his hospital room. Richard was not invited. He was too busy on a business trip in Aspen, which was actually a ski vacation with Amber. "Alistair," Arthur said, his voice weak but his will firm. "Clara and Marcus have the file. It's an open and shut case for embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. If Richard behaves, if he accepts my will and walks away with his watch, the file remains in your vault. The second, he contests the will or harms Clara in any way you are to hand it directly to the DA. It's his severance package." "Arthur, that's—" Alistair was stunned. "He's my son," Arthur said, a tear rolling down his cheek. "And I cannot save him, but I can give him one final choice, poverty or prison. It's all he has left." Clara had held his hand. "I'll be fair, Arthur, I promise. But I will not be weak." "I know," Arthur smiled. "That's why you're in charge." So when Clara stood in that boardroom, she wasn't just armed with a will. She was armed with a nuclear warhead of a legal file, courtesy of her late father-in-law. Richard's pathetic threats of "I'll sue" were like a child threatening a tank with a water pistol. He had no idea the tank's cannon was already loaded, aimed, and had his name on the shell. His hidden marriage was the public execution. His hidden crimes were the guarantee it would be final. The boardroom doors opened again. The sound which moments ago had signaled Richard's final humiliating exit now announced the arrival of the future. The 3 most powerful independent directors on the board of Sterling Global entered George Henderson, Elara Davies, and Michael Vane. Elara Davies, a formidable woman in her late 70s, with a steel grey bob and a mind just as sharp, walked in first. She had built her own shipping empire before joining Arthur's board. Michael Vane, a logistics and tech guru in his 50s, followed, his eyes already scanning the room, absorbing the new power dynamic. Last was George Henderson. He was the old guard, a contemporary of Arthur's who ran the entire European division. He was a man who believed in tradition, handshakes, and a firm patriarchal line of succession. His face was a thundercloud of disapproval. Ilara and Michael walked toward the head of the table, their expressions a mixture of relief and intense curiosity. George, however, stopped just inside the door, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mrs. Sterling," Ilara Davies said, her voice a gravelly purr. "Or should I say, Madam CAO? It's about damned time. That Kensei Solutions deal last quarter, the one Richard so poorly tried to take credit for, that had your fingerprints all over it, didn't it?" "Child, nah." Clara, who had remained standing behind her new chair, inclined her head. "It was a complex negotiation, Mrs. Davies. I was pleased with the outcome." "Pleased?" Michael Vane whistled, taking a seat. "You saved us $200 million and secured a 10-year exclusive contract. Arthur hadn't pulled a move like that since 1998. We were impressed." "I am not impressed." George Henderson's voice boomed from the end of the room. He began his slow, intimidating walk down the length of the obsidian table. "I am appalled. We have been made party to our family soap opera. Arthur, God rest his soul, was a great man. But this is a circus. He disinherits his only son and leaves the entire $800 million global corporation to his assistant, Alistair Finch, who had been quietly organizing his documents, spoke without looking up. To his legal daughter-in-law, Mr. Henderson. The will is ironclad. Mrs. Sterling is the majority shareholder. She is the board for all intents and purposes. Your presence here is a courtesy." "I don't care about the legality," George snapped, slamming his palm on the table. "I care about the market. I care about the shareholders. In 10 minutes, this hits the press. Arthur Sterling's heir, apparent fired and thrown out. Secret wife takes over. The stock will plummet. We'll be facing hostile takeovers by lunch. This is a disaster." He finally reached Clara, looming over her. He was a big man, used to winning arguments through sheer volume and physical presence. "So, Madam CEO," he sneered, "what is your 100-day plan? What assurances can you possibly give us that you are not going to run my old friend's legacy into the ground? Speak. Convince me I shouldn't walk out that door, call my broker, and sell every share of Sterling stock I own." The room was silent. Ilara and Michael watched, unblinking. This was the true test. Not the will, not the cheating husband. This. Clara did not flinch. She did not look down. She looked George Henderson directly in the eye, her gaze as cold and clear as the glass walls around them. "You're right about one thing, George," she said, her voice cutting through his bluster. "The stock. But you're wrong about the direction. You're worried about a circus. I'm here to tell you the circus just left." She gestured to the intercom. "Mr. Finch, if you would, connect us to the New York Stock Exchange. My press team has been on standby for an hour." Finch hit a button. "You're live, Mrs. Sterling." Clara leaned forward. "This is Clara Sterling, new chairman and CEO of Sterling Global. We are releasing our Q4 projections and a new 5-year strategic plan. As of 900 hours, Richard Sterling has been removed from the company for cause. All vanity projects, including the Titan initiative, are terminated, saving $50 million in annual overhead. That funding is being reallocated to fast-track the Green Sterling initiative." Ilara Davies's jaw dropped. That was her passion project, a multi-billion-dollar plan to make their entire shipping fleet sustainable, which Arthur and Richard had repeatedly vetoed as too expensive. Clara continued, "Which we project will make us the first carbon-neutral global logistics company in the Fortune 100, opening up an entirely new ESG investor class. Furthermore, a full audit of the European division is underway, and Mr. Marcus Thorne is being appointed President of European Operations to oversee a complete restructuring." George Henderson's face went from red to a sickly, mottled grey. You can't be serious," he stammered. "Thorne, he's just a bean counter, an auditor." "He's the only one," Clara said, her voice dropping, "who had the courage to flag Richard's embezzlement 3 years ago. The one you personally demoted to a satellite office in Berlin for not being a team player. Yes, George, I know about that." This was the twist. Henderson wasn't just an old-school skeptic. He was a complicit coward. He had seen Richard's thievery, been warned by Marcus Thorne, and to avoid rocking the boat and protect his own comfortable position, he had buried the report and the man who wrote it. Clara stepped out from behind the chair, holding a new slim file. It wasn't the criminal one Finch had. This one was different. "This is Project Aegis File B. George, my personal operational audit. For the last 2 years, while I was getting you coffee, I was also analyzing your division. You, sir, are not a leader. You are a liability. Your division is a hemorrhage of $12 million a quarter in redundancies, which is my polite term for the 3 nephews you have on the payroll as consultants. You overlooked Richard's crimes to protect your own." She slid the file across the table. "You have 2 choices. You can retire effective immediately. You will sign this non-disclosure agreement, and you will be allowed to keep your full pension and the illusion of your dignity. That is Arthur's final gift to you. Or you can stay. And I will hand this file and Mr. Thorne's original embezzlement report to Mr. Finch for a full external and public audit of your entire 30-year career. Checkmate." George Henderson stared at the file. His entire legacy was contained in that folder, held by a woman he had dismissed as a coffee fetcher not 30 minutes ago. He was shaking. He looked at Ilara and Michael, who were watching him with undisguised contempt. He was finished. I think it's time," he whispered, his voice cracking, "that I spent more time with my grandchildren." "An excellent choice," Clara said coolly. "Alistair will show you the paperwork. Please have security escort Mr. Henderson from the building. His access is revoked." The old man, utterly broken, turned and shuffled out of the room, not even looking back. Clara turned to the 2 remaining directors. "Mrs. Davies, you will absorb Mr. Henderson's seat as lead director. Mr. Vane, your Aegis Logistics overhaul. Yes, I named it after my project is approved. The full funding will be in your budget by end of day. I've read your proposal. It's brilliant. I expect a full implementation plan on my desk by Monday." Vane, who was rarely impressed, looked stunned. "By Monday, Clara. Mrs. Sterling. Yes, of course. It'll be on your desk by Friday." "Good." Clara finally sat down in the high-backed leather chair. It fit her perfectly. "The king is dead. The prince is exiled. The old guard is retired. This is a new era, ladies and gentlemen. We have work to do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go and formally introduce myself to my employees." The elevator doors opened onto the grand marble lobby. It was 1:15 p.m., and the vast 3-story atrium was packed with employees returning from lunch. The moment Clara, flanked by Ilara Davies and Michael Vane, stepped out, a hush fell. The air was thick with the residue of Richard's departure. The whispers, the pointing, the covert cell phone videos. It all stopped. Clara began to walk her heels, clicking with a steady rhythmic purpose on the marble. And then a sound shattered the quiet. "There she is. That's her." From behind a large marble pillar, Amber Duval burst forth. She was a hurricane of desperation. Her perfect makeup was streaked with black tears. Her red dress was rumpled. Her hair, once a perfect blonde sculpture, was falling out of its pins. She looked exactly like what she was, a beautiful illusion that had just been exposed to harsh light. She shrieked, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. She rushed toward Clara, her eyes wild. "You witch! You manipulative, lying witch!" Two security guards, the same ones who had ejected Richard, moved to intercept. "Ma'am, you need to—" "No." Clara's voice was quiet, but it carried the absolute authority of the room. She held up a single hand. The guards stopped, but remained poised. The entire lobby was frozen. Every employee, every visitor, every courier was watching. This was her first public act as CEO. This was the real test of her power. Amber, emboldened by the lack of resistance, got right in Clara's face. "You think you won. You think you're so smart. You hid. You hid in the shadows like a rat while I was the one he loved." Clara just looked at her. Her expression, one of almost clinical pity. "Loved Ms. Duval or invested in?" "There's a difference. He was going to marry me." Amber was sobbing now, a performer playing to the crowd. "He promised me. We were in love. You stole my life. You stole his money." "I didn't steal anything, Amber," Clara said, her voice remaining calm and conversational, forcing everyone to lean in to listen. "I just kept what was mine. The money you're referring to, it was never his. He was stealing it. From his father, from this company, from all of these people." She gestured to the watching employees. "Liar!" Amber screamed. "You're a liar. I'll ruin you. I'm going to the press. I'll go to page 6. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them you were a sick, frigid wife. I'll tell them he had to come to me for warmth. I'll destroy your name." This was her last, pathetic, venomous dart. Clara almost smiled. "You are welcome to try," she said. She stepped closer, invading Amber's space, her voice dropping to a confidential, chilling whisper that only Amber could hear. "But while you're pitching your sad, cliché story, my lawyers, led by Mr. Alistair Finch, will be filing a civil suit for the recovery of all gifts purchased with stolen company funds. That $1.2 million apartment in the city, the convertible, every piece of jewelry, that dress you're wearing. It's all evidence, Amber. You weren't a fiancé. You were a co-conspirator. The legal term is recipient of stolen goods." Amber's face, which had been contorted with rage, instantly collapsed. The blood drained from it. "Stolen," she whispered, the horror dawning. "No, he said it was his trust fund." "He has no trust fund," Clara whispered back, her voice like ice. "He had a job which he's lost. He had an inheritance which he's lost. And now he has a criminal case file which I own. You were his accomplice in spending $1.2 million of embezzled money. So you have a choice." Clara stood back, her public voice returning. "You can disappear. Quietly. Go back to whatever life you had before you met my husband. Or you can go to the press. And the very moment your name appears in print, I will unseal that file and add your name to the list of persons of interest in a federal wire fraud investigation." She paused, letting the weight of the words land. "Your call." Amber Duval stared, her mouth opening and closing. She was a deep-sea creature suddenly exposed to the pressure of the surface, and she was imploding. She had come for a catfight and walked into a legal execution. With a strangled sob, she turned, her high heels slipping on the marble, and she ran. Not stormed. Ran. She fled through the revolving doors and disappeared into the anonymity of the New York street. Clara stood for a beat in the profound silence. She straightened her blazer. She looked out at the sea of her employees who were staring at her with a mixture of awe and terror. She smiled, and this time it was warm. "Thank you all for your patience. I know this has been an unusual day. My name is Clara Sterling, and as of this morning, I am your new CEO. I will be holding a full company-wide town hall tomorrow at 10 a.m. I look forward to introducing myself properly. In the meantime," she raised her voice, and it rang with a power no one in that lobby had ever heard from a Sterling before. "Back to work." It was like a spell breaking. The entire lobby seemed to exhale at once, and then, as one, people turned and moved. The buzz of work resumed, but it was electric. Ilara Davies put a hand on Clara's arm. "My dear," she said, her voice thick with respect. "Arthur didn't just leave you the company. He left it to a dragon. I am so very glad to be on your side." "As am I," Michael Vane said. "Madam CEO," Clara took the private elevator back to the 50th floor. It was empty, now silent. She walked into the CEO's office. Her office. It was hideous. It was all Richard. Gaudy, abstract sculptures. A massive, egotistical portrait of himself, styled like a tech mogul. Chrome and black leather. It was cold, arrogant, and empty. She buzzed the intercom for her new executive assistant, a woman named Maria, who had served Arthur loyally for 30 years. Maria. "Yes, Madam CEO." The voice was crisp, professional, but Clara could hear the smile in it. "I want everything in this office removed. Everything. The art, the furniture, the rugs. Box it up. Send it to Goodwill or the city dump. I don't care. And its replacement, Ma'am. Go to Mr. Arthur's private estate study. I want his desk, the big mahogany one. I want his chair. And I want the large framed portrait of the original 1920 Sterling factory. I want it all here by morning." "Yes, ma'am. With pleasure." Clara walked over to the desk. The only thing left was a single silver-framed photo. It was Richard and Amber at a polo match, laughing, champagne in hand. The picture of a life built on lies. She picked it up, looked at the two smiling, false faces. Then she dropped it glass and all into the empty metal waste bin. She sat on the edge of the now bare desk, looking out over the city. Her city. She pulled out her personal cell phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang, and finally a tinny voice answered from halfway across the world. "Hello, Delia." "Yes. Who is this?" "Delia, hi. It's Clara. Clara Sterling." There was a long pause. "Clara Richards." "Clara. What's wrong, is it Dad? Oh God, I knew I should have." "He's gone, Delia," Clara said softly. "He passed 2 days ago. I'm so sorry." Oh God." Clara heard a muffled sob. "And Richard, I can't. I can't come back, not if he's in charge." "He's not," Clara said. "What? He's not in charge, Delia. I am. It's a very long story. But your father, he left you $20 million and full funding for your clinic." He did." Delia's voice was thick with tears. "I thought, he was so angry, I left." "He was proud," Clara said, her own eyes stinging. "He was so proud. He told me all about your work. And Delia, I'm looking at the company's discretionary fund right now. I'm doubling your inheritance, and the clinic's funding, I'm tripling it. Build the hospital wing you told him about. Build 2. A choked, disbelieving sound came over the line. "Clara? Why?" Clara looked out the window at the Sterling Global logo on the building across the street. "Because your father's name deserves to stand for something good. He's gone, but we're still here. It's time to rebuild the family, Delia. Welcome back." She ended the call, took a deep breath, and stood. The sun broke through the cold November clouds, and the light flooded the empty office, catching the glass on the obsidian table. It wasn't a tomb. It was a throne. And the Queen had at last taken her seat. And just like that, the glass ceiling didn't just break. It was pulverized. Clara, the woman they called a ghost, the assistant, the help, proved that true power isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being the smartest. Richard, blinded by his own arrogance, built his own prison, and his wife Clara quietly handed him the keys to lock himself inside. Karmic justice was served cold in that boardroom, and it tasted like an $800 million empire. What did you think of Clara's ultimate revenge? Was Richard's downfall satisfying, or did he deserve even worse? Let me know in the comments below what you would have done if you were in Clara's shoes. If you loved this story of betrayal and sweet, sweet justice, please make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. We have new dramatic stories dropping every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one.